Hi, welcome. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for
Um,
having me.
yeah, so if you could just start out, just real briefly say your name, pronouns, and what your occupation or profession is.
Absolutely. So my name's Kai Walsh. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a digital marketing strategist and a social entrepreneur.
Awesome, thank you. And how do you identify? What identities would you like to share in this video?
Absolutely. So I identify as trans masculine, non-binary. I am neurodivergent. I think that's a really important part of my identity as well. Um, yeah, I'd say those two work pretty well. I also identify as queer, pansexual. Um, yeah,
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. So let's dive into getting to know you. Tell me something about yourself that is unique, fun, or interesting that has nothing to do with your career.
so let's see. I'm fluent in French. I definitely nerd out on like French language, anything. Um, and I was gonna say it doesn't really have to do with my career just yet, but I plan to bring it in somehow in the future. But I'd say that's definitely a big passion, big hobby of mine. I also love to ski, which is why Colorado is pretty nice for that.
Yeah, it's nice to be just a short trip away from the mountains, isn't it?
Seriously, yeah.
Yeah, I don't ski, but I hike, and I definitely appreciate that.
Oh yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
Colorado.
yep, yep. So your career, let's get into that now. Where do you work and what's your job title?
Yeah. So essentially, about 2 years ago, I went off on my own and started Kai Consulting, which is a digital marketing consulting agency. And I specialize in SEO, search engine optimization. So I started doing that for a while. I'm also a social entrepreneur, as I said. And so I launched an organization called the Queer Umbrella about a year ago. And so I'm definitely doing those in tandem. The Queer Umbrella is more my passion side gig, but takes up a lot of my time and thinking. But yeah, so that's what I do. Do you, we're
Yeah.
not getting into the weeds of what the day to day looks like yet, right?
Yeah, well, let's get into the weeds. What's it
Yeah.
like being being an entrepreneur who founded your own consultancy, and then what's it like to be a consultant day to day?
Yeah. So essentially, I think kind of the social entrepreneurship route and digital marketing consulting, I think they really balance each other well and they kind of feed into each other a lot more than I originally anticipated. So, as a consultant, a day to day looks like, just reaching out to different organizations, checking out their website, their social channels, and also just Googling them and seeing, kind of where they are on the list of ranking on Google search engine results page. And yeah, so essentially what that looks like is I just go through and write up recommendations and do kind of an audit of everything that they're doing digitally.
Mhm.
And then, and then just start working on the optimization portion of it. But yeah, it's essentially just seeing what they're doing and seeing how we can make it more effective and more easily found by any kind of users searching for that kind of product or
Mhm.
service.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the day to day as a social entrepreneur, it's a lot of researching and ideating and innovating, and I think it uses a lot of creativity, which is cool. Just kind of thinking outside of the box and outside of the ways that we're doing things.
Mhm.
And especially, this queer organization, was founded after my own experience trying to find queer community and not really being able to access it. And so, really, our mission is to just make queer community accessible. And so, we do that by cultivating physical and digital spaces for queer empowerment. So, that looks like events, workshops, virtual and in person. And yeah, working directly with companies on how to improve and advance LGBTQ inclusion in the workplace.
Yeah. Wow, that's a lot of different types
I
of
know.
projects that you're working on there. Uh,
Yeah.
let's focus in on the digital marketing side. You know, if someone were interested in a career in digital marketing and doing this, like looking up organizations, making recommendations to them and such, like what are some of the types of things that they would want to learn? Like what kind of skills would someone need to do work like that?
Mm. So, I mean, I think the cool thing about growing up in this digital age, especially as millennials and Gen Z, is we actually have a lot more knowledge and awareness of digital marketing than we may give ourselves credit for. So when we're on social media, and it just takes a little bit of a framing your mindset a little differently while you're on social media, for example, right? So instead of just consuming content, like going through and being like, wow, this post is really effective. Like, why is that? What drew me to it? And so we become kind of like our own experts in digital marketing and what kind of attracts us to the types of content that we're taking in. And oh, I forgot the question.
No, I think that was a really astute answer to that. Like that, because I think sometimes when people consider the type of skills they need for something, they're like, okay, I have to go take a class in this and I have to like practice this. But you know, this idea that the skill of looking at, you know, what entices me to want to read more or want to click out of this ad to go somewhere else or to find this service, like that critical thinking is the skill in itself. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and especially with, like, Googling things too, it's like, have you ever been frustrated with, not being able to find something you keep searching for, and so you change your search and you add a few different words and you rearrange until you find what you're looking for, right? And so search engine optimization is, that's a big part of it, is just, how do you get in front of the user who's searching for something that, they need and that you provide. So just making it kind of easier altogether.
Yeah, that's very cool. So then with it's Queer Umbrella, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so with Queer Umbrella, how do you like tell me about starting something to meet a need that you have? Like what has that how has that been turning out and what has it been like to uh help meet that need for other people too?
So a big project that we've been working on, and especially just starting this organization and then realizing just how vast all of the opportunities are. Like, we could take it down the route of a social organization where we're strictly connecting people in social spaces, or we can work directly with businesses and consult them on their DEI and belonging work. But I think the sweet spot that we've kind of found is taking one social issue, which for me is very, very personal. The issue of like public spaces and restrooms and
Mhm.
gendered restrooms. And so understanding that I live in Denver, which in 2016, they passed an ordinance for every single use restroom to be converted into a gender neutral restroom. So you can't discriminate regardless. Like if it's a single use restroom, it needs to be gender neutral.
Mhm.
And so I personally want to see people go farther than that. I want to see businesses step up and go farther than that, and making all restrooms gender neutral. And so that's something that we're working with a company right now, a fairly large company in like 37 different states, to work on changing all of their restrooms in their headquarter office in Denver to gender neutral, and then finding a way to expand that to all of their properties. And so I think that's the really cool thing about social entrepreneurship is you get to be creative with the ways that you approach different topics and issues, and finding creative ways to use businesses to advance inclusion in the workplace. I think that's like the best part of what I'm doing right now, is it's something that's going to benefit other people, but it's also going to benefit myself as a trans mass non-binary person who's had to navigate my transition in spaces like around other people, and especially just the frustration I feel whenever I go to like a progressive space and they still have gendered restrooms and I'm forced to choose between male or female, which I don't identify with either, and it becomes more, I'd say, my safety with regards to restrooms is really dependent on the way that other people are perceiving me. So if they're perceiving me as masculine and I'm in the woman's room, there is this like uncertainty and this kind of conflict that rises. And the amount of times that I'm like, no, no, don't worry, you're in the right restroom. And, kind of that unease of using male restrooms, it just seems like a really simple solution. Why did we gender this in the first place? So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool to hear how you're using, like you said, the ability to creatively work with businesses to address a problem like that. And, a lot of my professional background, when I was still doing like LGBTQ focused work before becoming a career coach, was on kind of the nonprofit and the policy side, and like how do we pass things like that ordinance. And so
Right.
it's really cool to hear you talk about this other side to get to, yeah, like a really crucial issue like that. And just how much of a difference having a restroom that actually aligns with your identity, where you feel safe and you feel like you belong, can make. Because the first 4 years that I was in my current job, there wasn't a neutral bathroom in the building that I worked in.
Man,
And
yeah.
finally I'm in a building where it's like, oh, I don't have to think about this anymore. It's
Exactly.
liberating.
It's such a sense of relief. It's like, okay, perfect. Like no choice has to be made. We'll just go to the bathroom like normal humans.
Yeah, yeah, it becomes the non-issue that it should be.
Exactly. I
Yeah,
couldn't agree more.
yeah, I love it. I'm so glad to hear you're working on that project. Um, so let's shift a little bit to the work culture of being a consultant and an entrepreneur. Like, what is like your work-life balance like? And what are things like, I don't know, like even like attire and such? Like, what's all of that part of the work like?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll start with attire and then go back. But attire, so for me, what's most important is that I don't feel like I have to restrict myself in the way that I present my queerness, the way that I dress or express myself. And especially making sure that anyone I'm working with, like that they understand and recognize and respect. They don't even have to understand, but merely like respecting my pronouns and my identity. And so I think that's definitely been cool. There's nothing better than dressing up in masculine clothing that's also like professional. I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, I'm a handsome little man. But definitely, gender fluidity in it. But yeah, and I have like one earring, and I don't know, it's just like it's not an option to ever consider queer expression as unprofessional, and so that's kind of something that I'm sticking to. It's also easier for me because I work from home, I am my own boss, I'm working alone all of the time, so really the only time that I need to worry about my attire is for video calls. So that gets relatively easy. You have no idea what I'm wearing below this. But but yeah, I'd say the culture that I have kind of created for myself. So definitely toward the beginning, it was a lot of go, go, go and work every hour and never stop for the weekend to enjoy the weekend, like just work through the weekend. And so I found myself kind of doing that whole work is life thing for a while. That's unsustainable, turns out. Burnout is real. And if you're not taking the time to, take care of yourself and fill up your own cup, it's gonna be tough. You're gonna burn out or, whatever arises. It's just important to make time for yourself. So I think that's the really cool part about working my own hours and creating my own schedule and scheduling meetings, and then also making sure that on off days or periods of time where I don't have meetings or anything like
Mhm.
specific to do at that moment, taking a walk and working out, and taking time to cook for myself and doing laundry and making it a part of my work routine as opposed to, those are two separate parts of my life, like layering them up and doing like a little self-care, a little bit of work, and going that
Yeah.
way. Yeah, I've definitely found a good balance, I'd say, as of late, but it definitely hard not to get on my own case when I'm like, "Oh, it's a Sunday. Maybe you should sit down and do work." And I'm like, "Actually, no, it's a Sunday. Like if you're gonna sit down, you're gonna do nothing, and take some time." So
Yeah. Yeah, sounds like it took a while to get to the into the good rhythm and that integration of work and life, but that you have found it, and that's really cool.
yeah, definitely.
How so over the 2 years that you have been, an entrepreneur, how has that been different from when you worked at a company or worked for someone else?
Yeah. So I think a big part. So I'm a big like values person and making sure that I'm aligned with the people that I'm working with. And I think at an agency, that was something that I had less say over, which clients we have and the work that I was doing for them. And so I guess being an entrepreneur and being a consultant and having to go out and find my own clients if they're not coming to me, that gives me a chance to kind of vet who I work with and make sure that, they're aligned with the work they're doing and wanting.
Mhm.
And so I think that's been a really cool part of it. But also, um, I think working at an agency and working around people, I think, especially after COVID, I'm recognizing the benefits of, being in an office and being around people and talking things through.
Mhm.
So there's a part of that that I miss. But I don't know, the freedom and the ability to work on projects that I'm passionate about as opposed to just kind of
Mhm.
half-assing it, and not really being that invested in what I'm doing. So yeah, I found that to be a big change. But also a thing I've been talking about lately with some people is um, the ability to access new information and education and knowledge from other people in the office, for example, like
Mhm.
being able to learn from your coworkers or your superiors. I don't like making the hierarchy
Yeah.
reference, but you know what I mean. And so a big thing that I've found myself struggling with, but then I've gotten pretty lucky from there, but essentially having to go out and find my own mentors and find people who I can directly call on and learn from. And it's a different kind of exchange, I guess, than in an office at an agency. But surrounding yourself with people who are on the same wavelength, who kind of, they're down to support you and your vision. I think that's a super important part of being an entrepreneur, especially while you're on your own, if you're working from home alone, whatever that looks like. So,
Yeah, so really getting that network built up of peers as well as mentors.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something that should be prioritized, I would say, no matter where you work, but especially when you're solo. You're reminding me of an activity that in my university job, sometimes we do as students, which is to have them reflect on a personal board of advisors. So, if they made themselves like imagining their brand and their job search as an organization, who would be on the board of that and who would they go to for different types of advice? And something that sometimes people are like, oh yeah, I don't really need that yet. In networking, I'm not job searching right now. Maybe I don't need that, but emphasizing how important that is. So
especially for long term, you never know. Just connecting with people who are aligned with your values, you literally never know what could come of it, what could come of it in the future, who they know, who they could introduce you to.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. It is so cool, the opportunities that can come up from networking and the connections that other people make and the people that they introduce you to.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, well, let's see. I want to make sure to get to an education, like a little bit about education. So tell me about your educational background, what you studied, and how that has helped or not in your career.
Yeah. So, uh, I went to University of Denver, and I studied French and communication and a minor in marketing. So I always thought that was kind of funny saying that out loud. I'm like, why did I only minor in that? But I think everything kind of happens for a reason. And so obviously French, as I mentioned, definitely haven't utilized that very much in my career journey, but it's just an added value. It's something where I can connect with other francophiles and francophiles, I forget the exact word, but yeah. And then communication, so that was a really important part of my own journey, and doing a lot of research and then writing and researching, like, people and queer people especially. I always kind of tended toward queer topics while I was studying, and that really helped me understand kind of my identity and who I was, in order, because I had to do that work before I could really get to a place where I could do regular career work. So I think that was really special, and also gave me a lot of just knowledge and skills with researching and writing a lot, so I definitely utilize that. But marketing, so I ended up going to South by Southwest through a course, and I had taken a few different digital marketing courses
Mhm.
before then, but going to that conference just inspired the hell out of me. I was like, wow, this is what I could do, with my life and for the rest of my life. And just all the ways that digital marketing is growing and the opportunities that are available. Yeah, I mean, it was pretty cool. So yeah, I'm glad that it was a minor. Looking back, it would have been nice to have taken more courses and learned more while I was there. But I mean, everything I've needed to learn, is available at my fingertips. Like, the internet has so many different educational resources
Mhm.
available. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Well, and I love, that you shared the research and writing skills from your liberal arts major in communication,
yeah,
combined with that business minor, that the skills of research from liberal arts are applicable to digital marketing, to what you're doing as a consultant, that you didn't have to study it over in a business context for it to still be very valuable.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I have worked so much with liberal arts majors and students, so I always love a good liberal arts the applicability of liberal arts skills type of
yeah.
stuff.
No,
Uh,
seriously.
Something else you said really stood out to me, and you were talking about gravitating toward queer topics in your communication classes, and you said that you needed to do that work on identity before you could do the career work. I'd love to hear you talk more about that.
Yeah, I mean, and so this was a big, so I came out as a lesbian freshman year of college, and that had been just really hard. Like, I had some serious internalized homophobia. I come from a very conservative Catholic family, East Coast, like just a very different vibe from Denver. And so it I definitely struggled a lot with coming to terms with, liking women. And then also just realizing like there's so much more to this identity that I want to know, so that I can have just a firmer sense of self, because for so long it just was this vague idea of like, oh, I'm alive, I'm living, I'm going through the motions. Okay, here we go. And so, that was important for later as well, because, gender and sexuality are so intertwined, but they're also so distinctly separate. And, I needed to go through that coming to terms with my sexuality in order to then get on to the next coming out process of coming out as trans and understanding like, oh, okay. The first time it was like, yeah, this makes sense. It's a lot to take in. But then the second time with gender, I was like, oh, whoa, this is big. This changes everything. And then also just really aligned, things started making sense, like the breadcrumb trail of, oh yeah, looking back, like I am trans. I have always been trans, and it's a part of my identity that I was never able to express or come to terms with myself. So I think that's the amazing part of kind of involving yourself in whatever you're doing with a queer perspective, queer lens, queer intention. Like the research part it was so fundamental in me starting this journey of becoming who I am today, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, and so just being able to explore my gender, and especially I came out as I started using they them pronouns at the old agency that I worked at, and I don't know, I don't think I could have done it at any other time. It was just perfect timing. It all happened the way it needed to. So,
Yeah, that's very lovely. Thank you for sharing.
yeah.
Yeah, because I think you're right. Like, there can be sometimes pressure of like, oh, like, why couldn't I have come out sooner? Why didn't I realize sooner? And just recognizing that, like, it's okay. Like, whatever journey you're on individually is your journey, and it doesn't have to look like someone else's. And it doesn't make someone less valid or like less trans, less queer to
Yeah.
have that different journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's the beautiful part of our community is everyone no there's no one singular queer story or experience. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty beautiful, not to get sappy, but
Sometimes you gotta get a little sappy.
I did it.
Yeah. So, you've talked a bit throughout our questions about like being queer and how that intersects with your career. Is there anything else that you would add about being out, being queer, being trans in your working life?
I'd say a big adjustment for myself, which again, I'm definitely privileged in that I am my own boss. I get to make the executive decisions about who I work with and what
Mm,
kind of organizations I'm working with and consulting for. But it took a lot for me to get to a place where I could confidently correct people when they misgendered me. And I think especially in the workplace, that's something so important, to feel safe and comfortable enough to, correct people.
mhm.
But I think, yeah, just something that I would tell myself at the beginning of all of this while I was just first navigating transness in my career is, don't be afraid to take up space, and you're allowed to be yourself and to take up your space and tell people, your identity and have them respect that. Like that is bare minimum. And so finding companies that are genuinely supportive of queer and trans people and making sure that they are walking the walk and not just talking the talk. I think that's really important for any queer person, making sure that there's inclusive policies and practices and genuinely just like the people that, if they're not queer themselves, that they're allies, and making sure that you don't stay around in like toxic in work environments too long. And especially if someone's not respecting your identity, knowing that there are plenty of companies and people out there who do. So,
Yeah, very important advice, especially
yeah,
for the younger queer folks going into their careers. Thank you. And I
absolutely.
and I think too, like what the idea of taking up space, sometimes there can be this idea that talking about queerness at work or being very openly queer at work, sometimes people call that like unprofessional, and just remembering that's not true. Like you can be professional, whatever that means, because that's a whole concept that is steeped in like white supremacy and is all sorts of oppression. But the idea that you can be authentically yourself and be, whoever you need to be for work, be respected, be competent, be confident, like queerness and that professionalism are not mutually exclusive.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
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 So, second to last, what advice would you have for any young person who's looking to go into your career fields, whether that's digital marketing overall or going into entrepreneurship and consulting? Like, what's one thing that someone should keep in mind if they're interested in that path?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm a big, big supporter of networking, as we've talked about briefly, but you know, look on LinkedIn and find people within like these industries and reach out to them. And, whether it's an informational interview, whether it's formal, informal, whether it's just a few questions, like I think it's so important to be talking to as many people as you can. And if you want to understand, the day to day and ask specific questions, like, you know, reach out to people. They're usually more than willing to have at least a 15-minute conversation, about what their work looks like and see if that aligns with you, see if that's something that you are passionate about. And also, there's plenty of different like blogs and articles, especially on SEO. But I'd say digital marketing podcast. That one at the beginning of my career, that it helped me tremendously. So they've got some great content. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome recommendations. So, where can people get in touch with you? Where can they learn more about your work and the awesome endeavors that you're involved in?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can add me on LinkedIn, Kai Walsh, or also social media, Instagram. Our handle is at the Queer Umbrella. And yeah, let's see. Yeah. I guess, yeah, add us on social, follow us, stay up to date with what we're doing. We're doing a bunch of different events in Denver if anyone's in Denver. So yeah, just reach out, say hi.
Yeah, awesome. I will make sure that there are links in the comments below so that people can quickly get in touch with you. Well,
Perfect.
thank you so much, Kai. I really appreciate it.
Great. No, thank you.
Yeah.